Hi, I'm Courtney Gould, and this is my weekly reflection for week 8. So the first thing I read was Tavers Chapter 7, using the curriculum to facilitate second language and literacy learning. And so basically, this chapter talks about that there are many techniques that teachers can use in the classroom to help both English-speaking students and second language-speaking students develop language skills and develop literacy skills as well. Um, you know, it talks about how important the environment is and how, that is what really makes it possible for students to learn. They need to be able to interact with freely and speak. So the first technique it talks about is oral language development for student language or second language learners. And so like this, it talks about, activity time. So this would be like when children are most actively involved in exploring, learning about their environment. So there's hands-on activities. They're playing with other children with themes. This could be teacher-directed or child-initiated. And then there was book reading time. So this can be hard since some of the second language learners are not so proficient when it comes to reading. And so, you can do this a number of ways. You can keep the book short. So if you have a longer one, you can read it over a number of days. Or you can just pick short books. You can use small groups. So here you compare students that are closely, together in skill, and then you can work individually with those type of students. You need to make sure to choose a book carefully, make sure that's appropriate for the students in the classroom. You can talk the story rather than read it. So you don't have to read the story word for word. Instead, you can look at the pictures and kind of create a story off of that. This helps engage the students. You can read the book more than once. This helps them, understand it, and they might pick up on something that they didn't the first time. It also helps with their vocabulary. And you can also engage children to read to other children. So if you have a student that is pretty proficient, they can read the book to others, and word for word doesn't matter in this instance as well. And this can help some of those second language learners feel more comfortable when being read to by their peers. Another technique was snack and lunchtime. So you can use this as a time to build a conversation with a student. It can be about what they're eating at lunch or something like that. So this is a good way to have a conversation and help them without making it necessarily a learning lesson. There's also outside time. So this really demonstrates physical competence without being put at a linguistic disadvantage. So children are more open to doing outside time and stuff like that because they're not worried about doing something wrong. They know how to play. There's also circle time. So this is great because it's a predictable sequence of events. And it requires them to respond, but they know what's going to happen. They know what happens in circle time. So this is great so they can get a little bit of a heads up as to what's going to be happening. The next technique was provided by the language acquisition preschool. And so first thing they say is, number 1, provide opportunities for language use and interaction. So this you can use activities, and these activities can be based off themes. So each week could be a certain theme. One week could be a theme about helping others. The other theme, or the following week, it could be a theme about, cooking, completely different themes. You need to make sure there's quiet time during this type of activities. And you also make sure that the environment is arranged to where everything is not readily accessible to students. Make it to where they have to come to you to ask a question. And you can even take this as having the students say, well, why don't you ask Tommy to help you with that? This can help them reach out to others as well. Number 2 is provide focused simulation on particular language features. So target words and forms used. You do this with a student and you model it, and they don't have to model it back to you. It's just encouraged that you show it to them. Number 3 is develop routine with children, help connect events and languages. So, this kind of goes back to the thing before with circle time. You make sure that the arrival time is always the same. You always do circle time at the same time. You eat snacks at the same time. This helps them get prepared for what's to come, and they know what to expect. They're not caught off guard. Number 4 is stimulate social interaction between children. So teacher redirect children and request them to have help from others. This is really good because you want them to be comfortable with other students and reaching out to them, not just you. The next technique was literacy development for second language learners. And so there's 5 activities that you can use to help prepare children for reading. One is target letter recognition, so alphabetical principles. Two is emphasize the sound that makes up a word, so phonological awareness. Three, show how books look and how they work, book and print concepts. Four, emphasize words and their meaning, which would be vocabulary. Five, encourage telling stories, explaining how it works, and building a fantasy world, which is discourse skills. And then that was number 5. So that was all for that. And then lastly, facilitating second language learning in early childhood. So, we already talked about routine and consistency is really key. Make sure that there is use of home language in the classroom, and make sure there is a literacy-rich environment where teachers use techniques to help them understand what's going on. Number 4, have the English-speaking students help those who are second language learners. And number 5, use different organizational and curricular modifications that help second language learners feel more comfortable, included, and competent. So you want them to feel like they are, included in this and not just left out. So that was for that reading. The next thing I read was the article, which was language teaching methodologies and approaches. And so I'll just list off all the methods and approaches that they gave, and then I'll talk about which ones I like the best. So they talked about grammar translation method, direct method, audio lingual method, community language learning, Suggestopedia, the silent way, total physical response, the natural approach, strategies-based instruction, notional functional syllabi, communicative language teaching, natural acquisition setting, structural-based instructional setting, commutative instructional setting, and scaffolding. So the 2 of those that really stuck out to me was direct method. And so this was Goen's theories method, which taught learners directly without translation. So, they would first be taught a lesson of foreign language and then follow the series with 15 sentences. So, if they were learning English, it would be like, I walk towards the door, I draw near the door, I draw near to the door, I get to the door, I stop at the door, I stretch out my arm, I take hold of the handle, and so you get the point. So there would be very short sentences, and there would be 15, and it would be in the new language, and it helps them understand, what happens to get to there. This classroom instruction was conducted exclusively in the target language, so they only use the target language. There's no home language, and grammar was important, which I think is important. I think they need to understand grammar, and this is something that I think could really work because it takes something that we do commonly, and they get a better understanding of it, and this helps them. They can take these vocabulary skills and use it towards other things. The next thing that I liked was the natural acquisition setting. So, this is where the learner is exposed to a variety of vocabulary and structures. If the learner talks incorrectly, they're not necessarily corrected as long as it is understandable. They don't want to discourage them. They're surrounded by a bunch of people who speak the language, so that helps them. They, hear the language for many hours throughout the day, and it's something that they, just absorb. They observe and participate, so they have to be able to respond. During playtime, they can have brief interactions. So I think that's really important. So the next thing I read was Ada Campo Unit 8, Learning to Know. So this, basically talks about how we start learning from the very beginning when we're in our mother's wombs, and how we continue to learn forever after that. And we never have fully reached our potential of learning. And that we need to always want to learn more. We shouldn't ever feel that we have learned all that we can learn. We need to feel that we can always do better. And, it talks about how there are multiple intelligences by Gardner, and, these were learned by words, by doing, and also by through our body. It also talks about how we have mechanical intelligences and interpersonal challenges, and we have to remember that all of these intelligences are capable to be learned, and we need to encourage our students to learn all of those and not just one of those. We have to influence our students to use all of these ways. So next I read Unit 9 of Ada and Campoy, Developing Relationships. And so basically it talks about how humans are extremely dependent on human relationships and how we are, set up to be social beings. We need the support from others for many years after we're born. We have to have someone to take care of us or else we won't survive. And, it talks about from there how everyone has someone that influenced them greatly in their lives. And, these people are really kind of what help build up and make us want to do something better for ourselves. Basically it says grandparents tend to have the biggest impact on us, and, that's who we really want to learn more. It also goes on to say, how parents can be, the influencer, but, there's not as many. Children can be a big influence for their parents. This is because we've buried and raised our children, and it tends to open up a side of us that we didn't know, and it influences us to do, maybe something better with our lives. And it also talks about siblings. So, your brother or sister can help influence you. You always want to strive